regulatory landscape for notified bodies.
Thank you for joining us for this panel regarding the regulatory landscape for notified bodies. I think we're going to start with a brief introduction of everyone, please.
So good afternoon. My name is Karen Farrugia. I'm the head Notified Bodies Surveillance and Clinical Relations at Malta Medicines Authority within the Medical Devices and Pharmaceutical Collaboration Directorate.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackie Grech. I come from Malta Enterprise, the Economic Development Agency for Malta, and I am the Senior Foreign Direct Investment Specialist for Life Sciences there.
Hi, everyone. I was just up before, so you probably know who I am. But Dan Donovan, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Mesmerize Group, focused primarily on how we can use emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and immersive experiences to extend the reach of medical knowledge in the world.
Hello, everyone. My name is Engin Çamer. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm working for a notified body in Europe as an internal clinician.
And Tisachi Nonglot of the Malta Medicines Authority.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we have quite a diverse panel from the regulators to experts from notified bodies themselves, from the conformity assessment body to stakeholders and investment assistants. All right, I think we can start the panel with a basic question. What was the impact of the regulations and the evolving landscape, specifically in terms of notified bodies, on your day-to-day workload, your day-to-day jobs?
So for us, practically, we became a directorate we became Malta Medicines Authority took over medical devices within its remit as of August 2020. So we were emerged within regulations. So we had stringent regulations, as we call them. And with regards to notified bodies, practically the challenges are there. If we're going to speak about the challenges for notified bodies, we could mention quite a number. For us, as an authority, we realized that the regulations brought over, as you rightly mentioned in your presentation, the shift in risk classes. So, for example, with IVDs, where before 80 to 90% of in vitro diagnostics did not need a notified body because they were the lowest class, now, with the regulations, practically 80% do need a notified body, and 35, there was a practically on MedTech Europe, a survey actually showed that around 35,000 devices need for the first time a notified body. So obviously that's a big challenge, be it for the expertise within the authority, as national experts on designation of notified bodies and the oversight that then entails, and also for the expertise within notified bodies. So for the actual designation process for notified bodies on medical devices to actually fulfill itself.
So for us, as an investment promotion agency, of course, we go out and look for companies within this sector to attract them to Malta. And while, of course, we're not the regulators, we need to keep abreast of these developments because we need to guide them in the right direction, especially when we're targeting companies from outside of Europe that are entering into this landscape for the first time. So it needed a bit of preparation from our end, but of course we have excellent relations with the authority. And I learned a lot from my colleagues like Karen and Louise. And yes, it's a challenge because of course we're competing with other global powers around the world always. So when suddenly people read in the news and keep updated that, as Karen said, devices suddenly need to go through notified bodies, it's of course a bit of a shock. But at the same time, what we have that is good in Europe is that we have a very, very, very good reputation of high standards, and that the CE mark is a gold label around the world. So even if you're looking at countries that don't require a CE mark officially in the regulation, they still look for products that do have the CE mark. So the fact that products are going through the process is actually a very good selling point.
I think from a global technology perspective, we are doing the best that we can to keep up with the varying regulatory landscape around the world. And, you know, just looking at the changes in regulations that are going on in Europe versus the sort of different attitude towards these things that are going on in the U.S., for example, you know, we're trying to find the right path to sort of navigate all of that when it comes to technology in particular. I think that, you know, what we're seeing is some creativity in regulatory authorities around how to apply existing risk frameworks, existing consumer and patient protection frameworks, and these kinds of things to new technologies as they emerge. Ultimately, I mean, from our perspective, we're working with the medical device manufacturers because I think that a lot of the burden will fall on them, a lot of the burden for training people how to use these devices, a lot of the things that affect patient outcomes ultimately rest with the people making the devices. And so we're starting there and also starting conversations with regulators around the world about how the technologies that we employ can make that whole thing better and make it more traceable from what are the impacts of regulations and changes that we make in the way we manufacture and test devices. What are the actual patient outcomes that are affected by those changes?
So for our perspective as notified body, I think the most challenging thing is, so we had to increase our capacity. Now we need much more professionals. For some positions, I can say that 3 times more. Actually now we have, let's say, a bigger team. And also, yes, there are several now MDCG guidance documents to be adapted. Specifically for clinical evaluation, at the past we just have MedTech document, but now maybe we have more than 10 guidance documents regarding clinical investigation. I think then the second thing is, you know, there is not a big pool to get the resource, and to adapt a notified body system sometimes takes more than 1 year for a professional. So we had spent lots of times in internal trainings. And the second issue is we had to harmonize between other notified body. And I can say that for the last 3 years, under the umbrella of Team MB, we had completed approximately 150 hours of clinical harmonization meetings. So it was the big challenge for us.
Yes. The establishment of notified bodies in Europe is a question where there is no competition because there is room for many more notified bodies. And we thought that Malta could be an ideal place where one could set a new notified body, especially since Brexit, because a number of notified bodies in the EU were in the UK. These have all had to be transferred to a EU territory. Now, we hope that we will be successful in attracting notified bodies to Malta, but the appeal is that one shouldn't be really hesitant or afraid to set up such a body, although it is with the new regulations. It imposes not only on the manufacturer a certain amount of duties and requirements and competencies, but also on the notified body. I feel that this is the type of activity that is ideal for Malta. One, because it doesn't take a lot of space. It requires personnel who are highly qualified. So it's a highly additive value type of industry. And it is also quite a clean industry. This earlier on we heard a lot about environmental pollution, chemistry, green chemistry, a very good presentation. This is an industry that for a small island state like Malta should be extremely attractive. We have quite some interest from outside Malta. I would look forward that in the same way that we had a successful batch release site, which is a Maltese-owned, Maltese initiative, we'll have similarly, together with the most welcome notified bodies from outside of Malta, but that will have also, it will attract also Maltese business people, Maltese professionals who would set up a Maltese notified body.
Thank you. So we mentioned regulatory, obviously our bias is European, but as Don has said, stakeholders obviously have to act in a harmonized manner, trying to assimilate as many regulatory landscapes across the world, not only in Europe, which is a very good point. Obviously, in terms of challenges that we've mentioned timelines in terms of training, in terms of scaling up for notified bodies, in terms of scaling up internally as an authority, the ongoing need, the ongoing bottleneck of notified bodies as it is. So that leads to the next question. Again, from the context of an EU authority, are we getting the balance right between innovation, between new technology, between standards and regulations, the harmonization that you mentioned, and so forth? In the sense that, are we going too far? Is the regulation a step too far? I would like to hear what you say.
I don't think it's a step too far. And even when people mention stringent regulations, it's as if it's something negative. It's something positive. At the end of the day, there was a reason why these new regulations were developed. So I don't see it as negative. I see it as positive. With regards to harmonization, quite a lot is being done, especially with the Medical Device Coordination Group and member states issuing guidance documents. As very well said, the clinical specialists here, they actually help to guide expertise, be it within stakeholders and also the authority, to further explain the regulation. Besides this, for harmonization, there's also JAMS at the moment, the Joint Action Market Surveillance, where there are projects being carried out, work packages being led by member states. Even if we think about the actual designation of notified bodies, they're done with joint assessment teams, so the European Commission or the member states. So there's always, what I see lately, especially as well, always a focus for more harmonization. So I think that's definitely the way forward, and even lately with the latest proposal being accepted, the European Parliament, on the actual, in 180 days, there's going to be a revision of the medical device regulations by the first quarter of 2025. That's what's actually as well being mentioned, more harmonization, so that there'll be equity like between different member states on how the authorities as well respond to certain issues, queries, clarifications, etc.
I think the key word that you mentioned is balance. And as Karen said, being strict and having regulation in place is very positive. I think something that Europe can boast of always is when it comes to the medical sector, patient safety is always first and foremost. And that is something that should be admired and we should keep pushing for in any aspect of medical technology. Obviously, something that maybe Europe could have thought of beforehand is that, okay, have the regulation in place, but the problem with the lack of notified bodies, so the timelines being so long, getting things to market. So companies are not worried about going through the regulatory process and sticking to the regulation. Great, fine, we want our product to be safe. But having to wait so long to get it done is a problem, and we do have to compete with other global powers around the world. Although our focus is Europe, we are competing with the American market, with the Asian market. So that is, I think, something that we should keep pushing for and helping, that is something Malta Enterprise is also doing, helping to set up more notified bodies. In Malta, obviously us, but I'm sure Europe on a whole is doing that to get those timelines back under control and getting products faster to the market, which is key.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting parallel to the kind of efforts at harmonization. I think there also needs to be harmonization in the way that we regulate medical technology and the way that we regulate other technology that influences medical technology, right? So if you think of things like GDPR and the way that we think about information security, privacy, and what kind of rights that gives to people, there's a harmonization to happen between the way we're applying those things to emerging technologies, and I'm thinking of AI in particular and how it is now impacting lots of things in medical devices and in pharmaceutical design and in all of these areas of research, with patient safety as the North Star that we're all thinking about. I think you need to take that right the way through to all of the regulations around data and technology and how that leads to the regulations around medical technology and clinical use of these things. I think we could benefit from a bit more harmonization of those things and looking at how do we measure what we're doing and use the outcomes and the data that we have, a sea of data now. How can we use that to inform the regulations and keep them, more up to date at the pace of change in what we're doing? I think it is important to keep everything grounded in evidence-based, scientific process. That doesn't necessarily have to stifle innovation, either in raw technology like AI or in medical technology or in its clinical application. I think there's a way to navigate that.
So, from my perspective, I can say that now I'm much more comfortable after the MDR, because let's say that it just explains issues more clearly. Now we have lots of MDCG documents which describes us how to meet with those requirements. Specifically for LI-based devices, we have a guidance document for their clinical evaluation, MDCG 2020-1. Also, we have a guidance document for novelty, so how to assess, how to evaluate, and also for manufacturers, how to, let's say, document it. So by MDR, so we are much more comfortable. And I think now we have sufficient guidance documents. Innovation means automatically, in many cases, you need a clinical investigation. And then, we all have lots of clarification by MDCG. So I'm good with this position, actually.
Yes, I fully agree that it is becoming more a question than if people are convinced and manufacturers are convinced and users are convinced about patient safety. I think everybody's realizing that patient safety is key. And so we come to I think we have already arrived at the next stage, which has clearly been expressed, that people are worried, and rightly so, I think, because of time frames. The difficulty is of time frames. And this came to the fore more clearly from the COVID, because if there were any lessons learned from the COVID was that it is possible to take quicker decisions, to take more harmonized decisions, because necessity brought that forward. And I think that necessity is bringing forward to take decisions as early as possible. Now, we talked about harmonization, which was key in the COVID. I mean, it was strange but true. At that time, you don't realize how the COVID meetings, some of them I had the privilege of sharing as a lead in the crisis management in the EU, but how everybody was talking as if they were of the same nation, of the same nationality. The same thing has to happen with life in the future, and this is more so when complexities such as AI and technology are coming into the fore, where the capabilities, the competencies of each and everyone will have to be joined together. What I think is critical is that we have to harmonize not only the processes, but we have to harmonize the communication ways. How to communicate between one culture and another, how to communicate between the politicians and the people in the field, the researchers and the practitioners, and how to get all these together so that rather than doing things in steps, one step after the other, as we are used to do everything, we will do things as were done in the COVID together. The marketing authorization for the vaccines was being studied not after a whole dossier was submitted, but during the development of the vaccine, which was, and I think it is such things that we need to develop, the harmonization of the communication systems.
Thank you for your insights. So I think we can agree that harmonization in the MDR is indeed a step forward in the right direction. As we mentioned, the MDCG documents are a collective endorsement from different member states that push forward the concept of a communal resource that everyone can follow, and that we're not, in a sense, stifling or limiting innovation for new technologies, especially now in these times of artificial intelligence. But rather, it's the bureaucracy of it that may, in fact, be stifling. All right, I'm looking at the time. We have 2 minutes left. I don't think we have time for another round of questions or another question. All right, so I think we can conclude and say that the regulatory landscape, although it is an overwhelming task to achieve, to get to the level of standard that the MDR is requiring of us from all fields and all sectors, that it is always, as Don said, the North Star being patient safety. So in essence, the patient is the core of the MDR, it is the core of the scope of the notified body, which in essence certifies the devices that are placed on the market. That's all, I think. Unless anyone wants to add a comment, but we have a minute left.
Totally agree.
We support.
Patient safety, first and foremost.
Harmonized approach. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.